Okay, so we are going to talk about the respiratory system. So first, we are going to look at the structure and the function of the respiratory system. Remember that the respiratory system uses the cardiovascular system to transport its goods places. So if you remember these two words, we talked about cellular respiration when we talked about photosynthesis. So we are going to recall that. Remember that cellular respiration is how cells get energy. So they break down the sugar that they get and they make ATP. I'm hoping that you remember that. And respiration is not the same thing. However, it does intake oxygen, okay, and cell respiration needs oxygen. So you can read this really quick if you'd like to. All right, so the function of the respiratory system is to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide with the external environment and your internal environment. So essentially, you bring in oxygen, okay, it diffuses into the capillaries that attach to your lungs, which goes into your blood. And on the way in, remember that the deoxygenated blood gets rid of carbon dioxide, which you exhale. So, your respiratory system consists of your nose and mouth. This is the passageway into the respiratory system. It also is nice and long so that it can help to warm the air. Okay, warm air is going to help your blood flow better and just help you better function and exchange gases in general. Then you have the pharynx, or the throat, and this transports air, food, and water. This includes the trachea and the esophagus. So remember, the esophagus is a part of your digestive system. The trachea is actually the tube that leads to your lungs. So if you look right here, this one right here is the esophagus. Notice how there's no blocker, but here, okay, there's a little blocker. That's to keep food from going down your trachea and making you choke. So when you do actually choke on something, it's getting stuck right here, and then you are bringing it back up by coughing, by moving air through that area. So you also have your larynx, or voice box. This is a part of your respiratory system. So if you put your fingers right here while you talk, you're going to be able to feel it vibrate. And these are vocal cords, and they're stretched across the larynx opening, okay, the opening of the larynx. And then you have your trachea. Okay, the trachea is the windpipe. It carries air from the larynx to the lungs, and it's covered in cartilage for protection. So all of these little strips are all layers of cartilage so that it doesn't collapse. Okay, when you exhale and try to push all the air out, typically physics would say something would collapse when you're pulling air out of it. Just like when you have a balloon, you blow into it, and then when you try to suck the air back in, the balloon collapses. Well, technically that should happen with your lungs too, including your trachea, except that this is nice and hard because it's covered in cartilage. So here's your voice box. These are the vocal cords, and that's found right in here. And the air will flow through it, and they go over the cords, which causes your voice. And then finally we have the bronchi, or bronchioles. So we have our trachea. This is the bronchial tubes. Okay, these are two tubes that split off from your trachea. One tube goes to the right lung, one tube goes to the left lung, and each tube splits into tiny, tiny tubes that are called bronchioles. So you'll see those with the number 7 labeled right here, all of these little tiny tubes. And then the little puffs at the end of each of these. So if we go back one, you see how there's little puffs. So these are the little tubes it's talking about. So trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and then each of these little tubes, or these little puffs at the end, are called alveoli. These are air sacs. These are tiny sacs in the lungs, and they're surrounded by capillaries, okay? Surrounded by capillaries, and this, in the alveoli, is where the oxygen enters the bloodstream and carbon dioxide is actually exchanged with the bloodstream. So just like this little demonstration, where you see the carbon dioxide leaves and then goes out the bronchioles, Okay, the oxygen has come in the bronchioles, is in the alveoli, goes into the capillaries, and goes into your blood. So it's a very much exchange thing where the blood cells are carrying carbon dioxide, then they pick up oxygen after they've gotten rid of their carbon dioxide. So each lung has thousands and thousands of alveoli, and that's what makes it such a breathable surface. Basically, the surface area of your lungs is like the size of a tennis court, and it's important that it is so that you can intake the amount of oxygen you need for cell respiration or for your cells to produce energy and to function. So breathing and respiration. So respiration is when the body obtains and uses oxygen and removes carbon dioxide and water. It happens in two parts. We have breathing. That's obviously the inhale. You have a little muscle that sits right below your lungs. You can kind of see it right here. It's called the diaphragm, and it moves up and down. Okay, it moves up and down as the lungs expand and contract. So when you inhale, the diaphragm moves up, and as you out, down, and as you exhale, the air moves out, and the diaphragm will move down. Then you have cellular respiration. Remember, this happens in your cells. This is once the oxygen has gotten to your cells and the nutrients from digestion has gotten to your cells. They use that oxygen and they release the energy from the sugar that's in your cells. All right, so that is it. Please write down any questions that you have for me, and I hope that makes sense. Thanks.